Hi there, I'm Mel Brewer and I'm the project coordinator of HaiR, a family violence training program for salons by EDvos. I'm here at Beauty Expo to present a session on how to respond to family violence. Before we start today, I'd like to do an acknowledgement of country. So I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where you are viewing this session today. For me, that's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, but I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of where you are and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge the experience of people viewing this session. So we do know that many people have a personal experience or connection to family violence, and we know that discussing it can be triggering or upsetting for some. So to that end, we want you to take care of yourself during this session. If you do need support after viewing this session, we encourage you to contact 1-800-RESPECT. They're a 24/7 national service offering confidential information and counselling. Okay, so who are we? So EDvos is Eastern Domestic Violence Service. We're a leading specialist family violence service in Victoria, providing services and support for women, children, pets and other animals. HaiR is one of our training programs that's part of our education and training department. So we began developing this family violence program for salons in 2016, and we started rolling out that training in 2018. Our training has primarily happened in Victoria because that's where we're based, but we've also been to ACT, Queensland and WA. And to date, we have trained over 800 salon professionals. So you might hear me use that word a lot, salon professionals, throughout the session. So despite our name, HaiR, this is actually for people working in hair and beauty as well. So that could be anyone from makeup artists, masseurs, waxers, nail technicians. It's anyone in hair and beauty. So to address everybody, we use the word salon professionals. So why do we want to do family violence training for salon professionals? Research has shown us that women experiencing family violence are more likely to talk to somebody that they trust. 68% choose their salon professional because of the relationship. 84% trust their salon professional support. We also know that salon professionals are very skilled and experienced listeners. And also research has shown us that salon professionals are being disclosed to. And without proper training, this can be quite hard and it places quite the burden on the salon professional. We also know that in the case of natural or large-scale disasters, family violence increases. So we have already seen a significant increase in family violence due to COVID-19. So the Australian Institute of Criminology surveyed 15,000 Australian women during the pandemic and found that almost 1 in 10 Australian women in a relationship have experienced family violence during COVID-19. 33% of the women experienced family violence for the first time. And just at EDvos ourselves, we've seen an increase in the frequency and severity of this violence. A lot of salons may have been able to stay open in some of the restrictions, not all, or reopen before other businesses, which makes them really critical safe spaces for people who are experiencing family violence. They may not have very many opportunities to escape the perpetrator and be able to tell somebody what's happening to them. So they may be doing it when they're coming to salon, which makes it essential that salon professionals know what to do when someone tells them that they're experiencing family violence. So what is family violence? You might be more familiar with the term domestic violence. Here in Victoria and at EDvos, we use the term family violence because it's a broader term that not only includes violence between intimate partners, but any violence between family members as well. So the term family violence is used to describe acts of violence between family members, including intimate partners, and these can be adults or adolescents, parent and children, including adult children, caretakers or partners against elders, and between siblings. So family violence can occur within marriage and de facto relationships, including same-sex relationships, between family members, so that can be family of origin or family of choice, between couples who are separated and divorced, or even within shared households. So how do we differentiate family violence between normal relationship conflict? Because every relationship does have conflict. The difference between that is that family violence is an abuse of power and control. It's when someone chooses to use violence, threats, force, or intimidation in an ongoing way. It's used to control or manipulate a partner, ex-partner, or any family member. It makes them fear their safety and well-being. So those are some key things to remember, is that it's power and control in an ongoing way that makes someone fear for their safety and well-being. You might hear me throughout this session talk about specifically violence towards women and women who are experiencing family violence. We do acknowledge that men are victim survivors of violence, and they should absolutely be acknowledged. And violence against anybody, no matter their gender, is unacceptable. The reason that we focus specifically on women is that the overwhelming majority of acts of family violence and sexual assault are perpetrated by men against women, and this violence is likely to have more severe impacts on female than male victims. So international and national evidence shows us that 2 women die every 10 days in Australia solely due to family violence. So 2 women are killed every 10 days. 3 women are hospitalised every week due to acquired brain injury from family violence. We also know that intimate partner violence is the leading preventable contributor to death, disability and illness in Australian women aged 15 to 44. That's also a key thing to note as well, that use of the term preventable. Family violence is preventable, but it requires everybody in the community to play a role in ending it. It's also important to note that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women are 35 times more likely to be hospitalised by family violence than other women. Women and girls with disabilities are twice as likely to experience violence as those without. Trans and gender diverse people are 3 times more likely to experience violence than cisgender people. So now we're getting into the 3 R's. So our 3 R's stand for recognise, respond, refer. So here we're going to be looking at recognising signs of family violence. So first, let's look at the different types of family violence. The ones you might be most familiar with are physical or sexual violence. There are many other forms of violence as well, and sometimes the signs can be quite subtle. So we also have intimidation and controlling behaviours, verbal abuse, emotional, social, physical, financial, sexual, spiritual or religious. So that could be forcing somebody to take part of some of the perpetrator's spiritual or religious practice, or not allowing the victim survivor to practice their religion. Pets and animals, abuse against them. We know that that can be used as a way to control the victim survivor by threatening to harm their pets. Stalking, which in this day and age doesn't need to be done in person anymore. It can be done online via technology. Reproductive abuse, so that can be things like forcing somebody to terminate a pregnancy, or not use birth control, or forcing them to have a child. And then obviously we also have spousal homicide. We're also seeing some types of family violence that are very specific to COVID-19. So these are things such as withholding necessary items such as food or medicine, using misinformation about COVID-19, trying to gain or increase control of the family's finances, preventing victim survivors from seeking medical attention, isolating them in spaces in their own home, or disabling mobility devices, and using COVID-19 as a way to excuse or justify violent and abusive behaviour. Working in a salon, you probably might see signs that are very specific to that setting. So these could be things like difficulty sitting or lying on a treatment table, showing emotions that are very strong and out of character, worrying about the cost of the service, that their partner will be angry, saying that their partner won't let them change their appearance or try certain treatments, having defensive wounds or cuts on their hands or on other places on the body that may be covered by clothing that they need to remove for a treatment, or always being accompanied by a partner. So maybe they're sitting outside in the car or they're sitting inside watching the treatment. Okay, so if you've seen some of those signs, what do you do? This moves us into responding to family violence. So this can be, if you're seeing those signs, asking about them to determine if they're family violence, and then also responding if somebody does disclose family violence to you. So why is it hard for somebody to disclose that they're experiencing family violence? They might have a fear for their own safety, denial or disbelief by others, so they're worried that they won't be believed if they tell somebody, especially if they have told somebody before and weren't believed. They might have an emotional attachment to the person who's using the violence. They also may have a commitment to the relationship. They want it to work and they're hoping that the person who's using the violence will change their behaviour. They may be experiencing a lot of shame, staying with the children. They may be isolated with a lack of resources, and they also may have attempted to leave previously, or previously tell somebody that they're experiencing violence. So why should you ask if you're seeing what you think may be signs of family violence? It's to help overcome those barriers to disclosing and to help reduce the shame that the person experiencing family violence has. It's also because very few women will approach family violence services in the first instance, or the police. They're more likely to tell somebody that they trust, like you. It's also to give a woman permission to speak about what's happening to them, to show concern, and to guide them towards safety. So, how do we ask somebody if they're experiencing family violence? There's two ways that we can do this. We can ask them directly or indirectly. So direct questions are a straightforward way to ask a client if they're experiencing family violence, and it invites them to tell you if they are, so opening up the conversation. So you can ask specifically about signs or behaviour that you may be seeing or are concerned about. So some examples of this are, I noticed some bruises at our last appointment. Are you okay? Do you ever feel afraid of your partner? I'm worried about you. Are you safe at home? If you don't feel comfortable asking a direct question, indirect questioning can be a very helpful way of uncovering experiences of violence. So this involves following a lead. So that's something said by a client that could allude to family violence. So an example of this might be, he doesn't like me to wear too much makeup. So they've given you a lead there. And so your response could be, what happens if you do? Now, it may not be family violence. They might say, oh, he just likes the natural look. That's fine. You've asked the question. You've opened up the conversation for them to tell you if they like. Because they could say something like, he gets really jealous if I look too good, which then allows you to say, what happens when he gets jealous? It's following the lead to allow somebody the opportunity to disclose if they would like to. So what if someone does tell you that they are experiencing family violence? How should you respond? Well, the most important thing to do is to listen. Listening to somebody and allowing them to share their experience can be incredibly powerful. They may not have had this somebody somewhere else before. Communicating your belief in what they're telling you, saying to someone, I believe you, is incredibly powerful. And again, something they may not have experienced before. Validate their decision to disclose, to tell you about it. So they may be regretting that, worried about, what they've done by telling you. Validate that. Say, thank you for telling me. Emphasize the unacceptability of the violence. So let them be clear that what's happening to them is not okay. Family violence is a crime. It should not be happening to them. And be clear that they are not to blame as well. So many people think that they must be doing something or there must be something wrong if they can't stop the violence. Be clear that this isn't your fault. A person who chooses to use violence, that's their responsibility, not yours. So some other examples of things that you can say when someone tells you they're experiencing family violence is, it must have been hard for you to talk about this. I'm really glad you told me. Thank you. I believe you. It is completely understandable that you're feeling this way, and this is not your fault. You don't deserve what's happening to you. Okay, now we move on to the final of our 3 R's, which is referring to the local family violence service. So after someone's disclosed and you are referring, there's some important ways to do this. One is to let her lead. So let her decide what they want to do. Don't assume what's best or most important for a person. They've already had a lot of their power taken away by being in a violent situation. They need to feel that they can make choices for themselves. Let them know that there are organisations that can help them. So this is your local family violence service, letting them know that there is somewhere that they can go for help and support, and helping them to explore the options that are available. So these are things like knowing your local family violence service and having those details on hand, and doing things like offering to be in the same room with somebody if they want to make a phone call to their local family violence service. Encourage them to seek professional help, but also respect their decisions. It's their decision if they choose to engage with a service or not. What you're doing is simply passing on those details or letting them know that there are places where they can get help and support, and it's up to them if they want to engage. So how do you find the local family violence service in your area? We're based in Victoria, so we actually use something called the Orange Door. So you can go to orangedoor.vic.gov.au, you can pop in your postcode and it'll bring up the family violence service in your area. If you're outside Victoria, you can use Google. What we recommend doing is engaging with your local family violence service and knowing who they are, having their contact details in common staff areas so that all of your staff know who the service is as well, contacting them and finding out if they have any resources that you can display at your salon. So a good place is things like posters on the back of toilet doors. So that's a private area where somebody can see the services that are available to them. So just a little bit of a recap of what we've learned, the 3 R's: recognise, respond, refer. So recognise, being aware and able to spot those signs of family violence, particularly in a salon setting. Responding, so if you are seeing those signs, asking the question to find out more, to find out if it is family violence, and to open up the conversation to allow somebody to disclose if they want to. And then responding appropriately when somebody does disclose. And then finally refer. So referring them on to the local family violence service with staff who are trained to appropriately help and support this person. So looking at the 3 R's and what we've learned, I thought it would be good to look at a case study and put them into practice. So our first one is the client of 5 years walks into the salon for the first time in 3 months, and you notice some things that are different about her. She seems withdrawn and flat. Her clothes are disheveled and don't fit her properly. She's lost a lot of weight. She has difficulty sitting still or making eye contact with you, but spends a lot of time looking out the door or responding to texts on her phone. So if we look at recognize, what are the possible warning signs of family violence you notice? So what can we notice here? So there's been a change in her pattern, so she isn't coming to you as regularly. There's been quite a change in her physical appearance. There's been a change in her emotional state, being withdrawn and flat. She's seeing edgy. She's not looking at you, spending a lot of time looking at the door. So there may be someone that she's worried about, or responding to texts on her phone. So respond. So what might you say to open up the conversation to allow her to disclose if she wants to? So you could say something like, I haven't seen you in a while. Is everything okay? Or I'm noticing you're on a phone a lot. Is there something you're worried about? So that opens up the conversation. And then if they do disclose, what might you do? So what might you do to refer? So you could say something like, I know an organisation that can help you. Would you like me to pass the details on to you? Simple as that. If we look at our next case study, so some people are a little bit worried that they might need to do something differently if it's a member of their staff or a colleague, that maybe they need to get involved more. We recommend just sticking to the 3 R's. So recognise, respond, refer. So let's look at this one that's about a staff member. So you are the owner of a salon and one of your staff members has been ringing up a lot and calling in sick for work. This has been worrying you. When she does come to work, she's emotional and distracted. Today she has come to work wearing more makeup than usual, and you notice that she has bruising under her eye and around her neck. So if we look at recognise, what are the possible warning signs of family violence that you notice? So again, change in her patterns of behaviour at work. So they're now calling in sick a lot to work instead of coming to work. There's been a change in their emotional state. They're very distracted. And then obviously there's some physical signs, which is the bruising under the eye and around the neck, which could be a possible sign of strangulation. So respond, what might you say to open up the conversation? So you could be very direct and say, I've noticed that you have some bruises. Is everything okay at home? Or you could say, you've been sick a lot lately. Is there anything you'd like to talk about? And then finally, refer, what might you do? So you could say, we have the contact details of the local family violence service in the staff room. Would you like me to sit with you while you make a call? So it's just as easy as that, when you can just go through the steps in your mind to make you feel confident about what you need to do, is think, recognise, respond, refer. So again, some final tips just to hold on to. Listen. It's okay if you don't know what to say, if you don't have exactly the right words. It's very powerful to listen and to also believe, just to hold space for somebody to be able to talk about the family violence that they're experiencing. And then also knowing where to refer. So as we said, knowing your local family violence service, having the contact details in staff areas or on hand. You don't necessarily need to give them to people who are experiencing family violence. That may not be safe for them to take things home, but just knowing the number. So you could sit with someone if they wanted to call. And then also we really recommend that you invest in proper training. So this has just been a very quick session today, looking briefly at family violence and how to respond. But this is actually a full 3-hour training that we do that covers the 3 R's and family violence and what drives family violence very extensively. So we actually run HaiR 3 R's live online via Zoom. It's for a minimum of 5 people and a maximum of 20. It's open to salon professionals all across Australia. And the training is actually free if you're a salon based in Victoria. And as I said, we've trained over 800 salon professionals, and we would love to train more. Also, just some self-care after viewing this session, but also if you have been speaking to somebody who's experiencing family violence, know the limits of your role. So you're not expected to be a counsellor. You are not expected to take care of the person by yourself and to do it all on your own. That's not what we want you to do. You're a salon professional first. We're using you as a tool to help guide people towards professional help and safety. Again, knowing your referral options. And again, that's because your local family violence service is staffed with trained professionals who know how to counsel victims and ensure their safety. And again, you might feel quite exhausted or upset or triggered after being disclosed to. So it's really important that you take care of yourself. We really encourage you to seek support or debriefing if you're feeling distress. Again, 1-800-RESPECT is a really fantastic service that's national. It's 24/7. So if in the middle of the night you're thinking about something that's happened during the day, you can give them a call and access some confidential support and counselling. Okay, so that's it from me on how to respond to family violence. Thank you so much for listening to this session. We are on social media, so we're on Facebook and Instagram at HaiR 3 R's. So we would love if you would give us a follow. Our program is actually unfunded, so we don't receive any ongoing funding or government support. So we would really love if you could support us by giving a follow, because it gets the word out there about this training and helps us sort of prove that this is a really crucial and important training for people in the hair and beauty industry. So thank you very much, and hope you have enjoyed your time at Beauty Expo Online. Thanks.